If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 121. 289 AC. Robert was looking out the window from the Casterly rock, and behind him were lords of the Seven Kingdoms who were having heated discussions to decide the war plans. If they could see his face right now, they would be shocked. While all of them were in a panic, he was smiling. Robert was so happy that his boring and meaningless life, at last, had some excitement. POV Robert Baratheon. After getting myself in order, I turned towards the lords at the table. The lord group, consisting of Lannister, Tully, Tyrell, and Stark, could not get out of their heated discussion, and the discussion started to escalate. Encouraged by Ned's presence here, Hoster Tully was lashing out at the Lannisters. Lord Tywin, how could you lose all of your fleet even though you received a fair warning about the Ironborn, and you couldn't even take down 20 ships while losing close to 100? Geryon Lannister might be known as a jolly man with a loud laugh. This time he had no smile to give, and he cut in before his brother could answer. This may sound like an excuse to you, but it was impossible to notice their approach. They came under such a thick veil of fog that you wouldn't believe it. I've spent my time at sea as long as I can remember, and I've never seen such a fog curtain. It was as if a great power wanted them to win. Maybe the Seven was testing us, testing the limits of our faith and courage, but one thing was for sure. All the luck in Westeros that day belonged to them. The old lion was silently watching them. My good father was a ruthless man. He would have his revenge for this insult. Because of his father, Tywin had a really fragile ego when it came to the Lannister name. Because of that, he couldn't take any blemish to the Lannister name. Hoster was an idiot, thinking he was safe from his wrath just because he became in-laws with Arryns and Starks. The ruthless old lion would hold on to this insult and pay him back even if he has to wait 5 or 10 years, but he will definitely pay him back. I turned to Maester Crelin and said, "Is there still no news from my brother? Where is the royal fleet?" It had been 3 moons since the burning of Lannister's fleet. I am about to burst because of boredom, and if I could land on Iron Island, I'd attack right now. The King of Salt and Rock, what kind of idiotic title is that? Those wet rats might have drunk a bit too much salt water. Just you wait, Balon. I am going to put my hammer through your salt-filled skull. My king, in the last word we heard from Lord Stannis, he announced that they had organized the remnants of Redwine's fleet and headed this way. They should have arrived here in about a moon, and if my guesses are correct, they must have started fighting with Euron Greyjoy's fleet right about now. How many soldiers do we have? He began to shuffle the papers in his hand. Oh, here it is. North 17,000 and 3,000, en route Westerlands 25,000, Riverlands 12,000, Vale 20,000, Crownlands and Stormlands combined 35,000, and lastly, Reach 30,000, but 20,000 of them en route to here. I turned to Hoster Tully and said, "Lord Tully, is this the best Lord Paramount of the Riverlands could do? Are there only 12,000 men in the Riverlands who dare to fight in this war?" Hoster Tully spoke with a slightly upset tone and a red face. "Lord Valder Frey pledged 4,000 men, but he is yet to join us. That is the reason for our lower numbers. We already have enough numbers to crush those wet rats. Where are you, Stannis?" Just then, a messenger came in and, in a panic said, "Ironborns are attacking the Seagard." I immediately went to the war map. "Who's the closest that could help the Lannisters?" Hoster immediately replied, "The Riverlands army is stationed near Oldstones and could be in support of Seagard in a few days. Send a word right away." Just then, a raven with V-shaped white feathers on its head was sitting by the window watching what was happening. POV MC. "Daddy, Ironborns are attacking some place called Seagard. Damn it, I just passed there 3 hours ago, and Sith is in her resting phase." At this time, I was flying over River Run. If I fly in a direct line following the coast, I will reach it in 3 hours. I changed my heading and flew as fast as possible. POV Jason Mallister. With the rising of dawn, Ironborn suddenly surrounded the castle, and we were besieged. With the sounding of the booming tower, we were able to get all the small folk to safety, but Ironborn burned all that was left outside of our walls. The bronze bell of the booming tower rang for the first time in 300 years. The Ironborns weren't an army, and it was obvious that they were not experienced in a siege. Normally they would attack and loot and immediately retreat, but this time they were trying to take Seagard. My forefathers defended this castle for generations, and it is not going to fall on my watch. Heir of Pike Roderick Greyjoy was the leader of this iron-born force, and the young heir must have been dying to prove himself. They had around 6,000 men, and we only had 1,000. We were too arrogant to think they would not attack us after all that defeat, knowing we had mustered our armies. It will be an uphill battle, but this young Kraken's head will be mine. The battle had been going on for 5 hours straight. The inexperienced Roderick had no other tactic other than to use his numerical superiority, and that didn't work well against Seagard's high walls, but the incessant rain of his archers had worn us out, and about 200 of my soldiers were either killed or wounded, but about 1,000 Ironborns were lost for this. It seemed like if this continued for a few more hours, we wouldn't be able to stop them from climbing the walls. Chapter 122. 289 AC. A/N, for this week, I am going to release a chapter every day to thank those who support me. POV Jason Mallister. We had lost another 100 men, and the Ironborns were coming at us like an endless wave. It was as if they multiplied as we killed them. We were tired of killing them, but they didn't seem tired of dying. We were slowly starting to lose some points of the walls. They were taking the wall, and we were pushing it back. It was like a deadly tug-of war. I stepped back from the front lines to get some rest and breath, and for a moment, I was immersed as I stared at the eagle soaring across the sky. Seeing an eagle, the symbol of my family, filled me with strength again. I took this as a sign from the seven and was about to draw my sword again and go into battle when the eagle suddenly dived in. It was so fast that I couldn't follow it with my eyes. This eagle suddenly charged toward an Ironborn who was on the ramparts, and although he was my enemy, I felt pity for that Ironborn because the eagle, with its blade-like talons, in one blow had ripped the man's face to pieces. Then the eagle made a circle in the air and started coming towards me. In a moment of panic, I wanted to protect my face and shielded my face with my arms. While I was waiting for the eagle's sharp talons, I opened my eyes and looked between my arms and couldn't believe what I saw. This giant eagle grew bigger and suddenly turned into a man covered with twigs, leaves, and moss. This man had a wooden old man mask on his face, and he said, "Are you Lord Jason Mallister?" "Yeah. Yes. I am Druid Emrys, a servant of the old gods. They have told me to help the North in this war. Even though you and your family do not believe in the old gods, they are magnanimous." I still couldn't understand how an eagle could turn into a human, but it was a fact that it was happening right in front of me. The man turned to the walls and looked down while saying something. POV MC. Jelmio Sumbi, Wind Shield. When I looked down the walls, I saw that about 4,000 Ironborns were trying to climb the city walls. Many points on the walls began to be crushed under the numerical superiority and the rain of arrows. After applying all my buffs, I summoned and buffed my familiars too. POV Jason Mallister. He kept saying things I didn't understand. Vocadini, summon familiar, Po, Erebus, Imu. In an instant, 3 big silhouettes appeared, 2 in the air and 1 on the ground. It was as if there were bottomless holes in the sky and ground, and from those holes came 2 black asthanite giant birds and a 34-meter-long snake from them. Then the man said, "Go kill them all." 2 black birds dived towards the Ironborns. These 2 birds were larger than eagles, but they looked like ravens. I couldn't comprehend anything I saw, and the thing the snake did was more incomprehensible. It burrowed into the rampart like it was made out of sand and didn't leave a hole. He turned to me and said, "I know it is shocking to see what you are seeing, but I need the Lord of the Seagard to be fully awake right now." He clapped his hand, and it took me out of my stupor. All the men who saw what was happening just stood there like a statue. All I could say was, "Who are you? Really, you never heard of me, Druid Emrys? I am pretty famous up north, and you are not too far from there. You must have heard my name, at least." When I heard his name again, I remembered hearing about a miracle man in the north that had healing abilities and could turn into animals, but most of the time, those kinds of rumors are nothing but mummery, but he was standing right in front of me. He said, "My familiars and I will defend this side of the wall, pull all your men to the other side and drive the Ironborn back to the sea." Our numbers were too low, and I had no choice but to believe him, so I ordered all my men to defend the west walls. The Druid turned back towards the walls and held his hands towards the Ironborns who were trying to climb the stairs. Inco-infra, dwellers below. Giant roots began to emerge from the ground and beat everything around them like giant spiked whips. The screams coming from under the walls were incessant. Then he said, "Percy Sondos, burning hand, dot." Both hands caught fire in an instant, and flames meters in diameter burned the Ironborns on the walls. At this moment, the two giant birds were reaping an Ironborn's life every time they dived and flew back up, and the smaller one was doing something weirder. Every time it dived in, it was like an invisible giant rock was falling on top of the Ironborn, and it was crushing them. I grit my teeth and slapped my cheeks as hard as possible. Those slaps brought me back, and as we began our attack toward the west wall, I saw a fully plated man with a golden kraken on his shield. This must be the young kraken, and he must have climbed the walls before the Druid arrived, or no foolish leader would even dream of climbing these ramparts after seeing what happened. I rammed at him with my shield, and he braced himself behind his shield. We were equal in strength, and neither of us was able to push each other. At this moment, Roderick tried to pull my shield aside using the axe in his hand, but instead of holding my shield, I immediately let go of it and grabbed my sword with both hands, and while I was at this close range, I struck Roderick in the face with the guard of my sword. Not expecting this, young Kraken was very shaken and staggered backward, so I took advantage of this opening and lunged forward with my sword, and just as I was about to pierce him in the throat, he took his arm as cover, and my sword stabbed into his arm. He groaned in pain, but I didn't want to give him any time to think, so I pushed forward with another attack, and he was flailing his axe in fear. In a fight, the second you panic is the second you lose the fight. We might be equal in strength but not in experience. He was too green and arrogant. He was swinging his axe wildly while trying to get up, but I was not going to allow that. While he was flailing, I found an opening and kicked his arm, disabling his axe. At that moment, I swung my sword with all my might and loped his head off his body. I walked exhaustedly to the severed head, took it in my hands, and shouted as loud as possible. Roderick Greyjoy is dead. Chapter 123. 289 AC. POV Brynden Tully. We set off as soon as got the word from my brother, but I don't know if we'll be able to reach Seagard in time. I told him we should have camped around Seagard, but he didn't listen. Sometimes I almost hate my mother for giving birth to my beloved brother first. But he is not entirely the cause of these bad decisions. Before he got sick, my brother was braver and more confident, but the illness took away his strong body, and his courage went with it. All that was left was a frail old man with grey hair who knew nothing but his pride. I continued to ride quickly, and 1,000 horsemen followed behind me. A horseman came towards us from the other side of the hill. It was one of our scouts. My lord, the fighting was already ended when we reached the city. The Ironborn had burned all of the town, but the castle was still standing tall. Lord Jason cut the head of Roderick Greyjoy and drove the Ironborn to the sea. He managed to do all that with only 1,000 inexperienced troops. Jason might be a bigger commander than I thought. When we reached the Seagard, the town was almost burnt to the last house, but the castle looked untouched. Jason Mallister is a talented man, and if he had 2,000 men or 1,000 veterans, I wouldn't be surprised, but he drove back 6,000 men with only 1,000 levies. When we reached the castle, most of the soldiers were gathered next to some of them, and they were listening to what they were talking about. When I listened to what was told, I could not make any sense of what I was hearing. They were talking about a man who could turn into an eagle and shoot fire from his hands. Maybe they were talking about a mummer's show. Jason Mallister came out of the castle and greeted us at the castle gate. Ha ha ha, Lord Blackfish. It looks like you are late to the party. We already drove those wet rats where they came from. I have heard about your great accomplishments. Jason Mallister shook his head in rejection. Unfortunately, I cannot take all the credit for this achievement. If it was not for someone else, we would have lost so many men before we could beat the Ironborn. We fought bravely, but our numbers were too low, and our men were too green. So, we couldn't hold all the ramparts. We were getting overrun, and at that moment, he came. He called himself Druid Emrys, the priest of the old gods. It was impossible to believe what was being told. If it had been anyone else and not Jason, I would never have believed it, but Jason Mallister is not a man to have an idle talk. This Emrys character, where is he? He left after healing our wounded, Blackfish. I understand. If someone else told me the things I am telling you, I wouldn't believe half of it, but all of it is the truth. He dug a monolithic obelisk 3 meters high from underground and engraved some writings that I did not understand. Then he sacrificed a sheep in front of this obelisk. The body of the sheep turned into dust, and a blinding green light emanated from the obelisk for a moment, and then we were all surrounded by a feeling of warmth and security. A wolf made entirely of fire appeared on the obelisk. The miracles did not end there. The open wounds of the soldiers we had brought around the obelisk slowly began to heal. We would have lost 100 more good men that day if he didn't heal them. He took a deep breath for a moment and continued. I say what I say now because I know you will keep it between us. After seeing all of those things, I could do nothing but believe the old gods were real. Most of the men that saw what happened do. Don't get me wrong, I still believe in the light of the seven, but I can no longer see the northerners as tree-hugging barbarians. What they believe is as real as the seven. Lord Jason, you must be jesting. No, I am dead serious. If you witness his power, you will know too, and he is as powerful as a 1000 man army. In this battle, he managed to hold at least 2,000 Ironborn with his familiars and killed at least half of them. While we held the other half, we only managed to kill a few hundred before they retreated. I was getting more confused with every word he spoke, and the story was becoming more unbelievable. What do you mean by familiars? He has 3 animals with him. 2 ravens, but they are bigger than golden eagles, and an icicle snake, but it is 3 meters long. They have magical abilities too. One of the ravens could crush tens of men with every one of its strikes, and the other was impervious to arrows. The snake was venomous, but this was not the most unbelievable part about it. It was able to dive into the castle walls without leaving any holes like it was diving into the water. After my talk with Lord Jason, I sent my men to the different parts of the castle and told them to confirm what Lord Jason told me, and they did. Either everyone in this castle was lying, or this man was as real as it gets. I have to inform my brother. POVMC. The sun was starting to set over the Sunset Sea, and the sky looked like it was on fire. I paused Sith for a moment and was immersed in this view. The sea, covered with the colors of the sun, was as flat as a sheet. It attracted people with the beauty of this landscape and the tranquility it gave. There was no sign that thousands of people had died in these waters just a few months ago, and these calm waters had swallowed more than 100 ships. The height of this cliff is about 700, 2,100 feet, meters. Its natural defenses have been expanded with walls, gates, and watchtowers. So, it's perfectly normal that even dragons couldn't topple the rock. The main gate of this castle is called the Lion's Mouth. This main gate is an enormous natural cavern reaching 60 meters, 200 feet, high located on the south face of the rock, and to reach this gate, you have to climb stone stairs wide enough for 20 riders. On the west side, at the bottom of the cliff, there are natural caves big enough to dock 20 ships, and those are the only ships that survived the Ironborn raid. As I got closer to the Lion's Mouth, I could see the shouts of panic and the gate being closed. It looks like Sith managed to scare the sentries again, and they were panicking. Chapter 124. 289 AC. When I arrived in front of the gate, the shouting on the walls had increased, and I stopped 20 meters from the gate in order not to cause more panic. A voice rose above the walls. Identify yourself. I am Sir Ermerdrazil, Knight of Winterfell. Why are you here, and what is the thing you are riding? I came here to meet Lord Stark, and what I'm riding is Sith, and she is a Shadowcat. Sith bowed her head like she was greeting them. I have never seen a Shadowcat, even half of the size of this thing, and you are saying it is a Shadowcat. Let alone touching this wild animal, how are you able to ride it? I tamed it, that is all I can say. Show me proof of your identity. Are you going to keep shouting from the top of the battlements? Is this how Lannisters welcome their guests? You are not a guest of the Lannisters until you verify your identity. You don't even have the decency to stand in front of me while saying those words. Don't overestimate yourself. If we want to, we can kill you, but because of your beast, we will most likely lose 2 or 3 men, and I don't want to endanger the lives of my man for my pride. Then show me the courtesy to at least provide your name so I can know who I have to thank for this hospitality. I had already sent a message with Poe to inform Lord Stark. I knew the Westerlands Knights were going to cause inconvenience for me because I am from the north, and the presence of Sith wasn't helping. Most of the Southern Knights see us as heretics or fake knights because we take our oaths in the name of old gods. I am Sir Lorien Lannister. If he is put here, he must be an unimportant member of the branch family to real Lannisters. Now we know each other. Are you going to provide entry to me? I am not going to take that thing to the inside of this castle. At least not without chains. Try it if you can, asshole. I will rip your head off. Sith let out a bone-shaking roar. Thereupon, the confusion on the walls grew even more, and many arrows were directed toward us. I slowly ran my hand over the soft fur of Sith and said. Calm down, Sith. No one can chain you while I'm here. POV Ned Stark. We were in deep discussion with other lords over war strategies. I haven't seen Robert's eyes shine this bright and full of life in years. With each passing year, he was getting fatter and weary of life. Some even started to call him Fat Deer or Pig King, but now the Devil of the Trident stood right in front of me. Seeing this Robert, I felt like it was just yesterday he united the 7 kingdoms. While we were discussing how to besiege and conquer the Iron Islands, we were also wondering what was going on in Seagard. Just then, a raven that I was used to seeing landed in front of the window and started to caw. I think it was called Do or Po. Lord Tywin's cupbearer, shoo it off, I said. Wait. Cupbearer froze, and everyone turned to me. That raven came for me. When I raised my hand, the raven flew up and landed on my arm. It was holding a piece of paper in its talons, and it dropped the message in my hand and flew back out the window. After reading the note, I turned to Lord Tywin and said. Lord Tywin, it looks like one of my knights, Sir Aemir Drazzle, is not able to enter the castle. Could I learn the reason for this? With a stone-cold face, Lord Tywin just looked at the knight standing next to the door and the knight ran out of the room. A few minutes later, he returned and said something to Lord Tywin's ear. Lord Tywin looked at the knight in disbelief, and the knight said. The messenger saw this beast and swears it's bigger than a horse. Lord Tywin turned towards me and then said. It looks like your knight rides a peculiar wild animal, which is why he is not granted access to the castle. On top of that, he refuses to chain the beast. I knew from Jory Castle's reports that Aemir was riding a giant shadowcat, but I had not seen for myself how big this animal was. After I took the oath ritual, he told me about his powers, but I still don't know the depth of his power. All I know is I cannot bow to him or make him an enemy. I hate being the Lord Paramount, Brandon is supposed to be the Lord. All I wanted to do was own a small keep and live a quiet life, but old gods have different plans for me, and it looks like they have bigger plans for Aemir. Yes, he rides a really big shadowcat, but do not worry, he is a warg, so his animal won't lash out unless provoked. When I said that, Lord Tywin and everyone who knew what that meant looked at me with surprised faces. Lord Tywin looked at me with his dead cold eyes and said. I thought the wargs were only real in old wife stories. Ah, they are real as it gets. He is able to control a few animals. POV MC. After waiting for 20 minutes, the doors finally opened. On the back of the Sith, I walked slowly through the door. When I entered the door, standing by the door was a man with greasy blonde hair combed back and green eyes. After bowing mockingly while smirking, he said. Sir Aemir, if that beast hurts someone, you will pay dearly. It was like I suddenly felt a pulsating vein on the top of my forehead. I was going to put this man where he belongs in anger, but at that moment, Lyca came to my mind, and I remembered how she died because I could not control myself. So, I began to compel myself and calmly turned to him and said. Ser. Sir Lernan. Sir Lurlan. I looked at him as if asking for his name. Sir Lorien Lannister. Ah yes, Sir Lannister, do not worry, I will show the utmost care. Chapter 125. 289 AC. POV Ned Stark. When I said his mount was a giant shadowcat, Yohn Royce's eyes widened. Yohn Royce was a really tall man with a booming voice, but he was silent when he had nothing to say. He didn't like using empty words like most Reach nobles. The Valaman was here as the representative of Arryn, but the control of the Vale army was put directly under Robert since the Lord Hand was busy ruling the realm in our absent king's place. The last time I saw him, he was getting really old, he was as thin as a stick. Lord Royce said. My lord, did you say he rides a shadowcat? It surely is not a shadowcat. While shadowcats are deadly animals, they are never big enough for a grown man to ride them. Oh, he is not a gown man yet, Sir Aemir Drazzle is almost 16, name day old, but he is as big as most grown men. I, myself never seen this shadowcat, but I have read many reports about its size from trusted sources. We have already sent a word to the gate, and he will be here shortly, and at that time, we will see if it is real or not. At this moment, Mace Tyrell intervened. Is that the point here? Lord Stark, how could you declare someone a magic user and knight him? This is a heresy, and it is an insult to the Seven. The Seven clearly forbids the use of magic and declares it the power of demons, and such behavior is not appropriate for someone of your stature. What the hell was this buffoon talking about? Lord Tyrell, you are talking about a northern knight. We do not believe in your gods, and to us, wargs are a part of our history and heritage. Yes, with time, we Northmen lost a magical part of our heritage, and only wildlings have wargs now, but it is still an undeniable fact that we, as first men, come from the lineage of wargs and green seers, and most importantly, why should we Northmen care what your gods think of magic? The ability to warg comes from old gods, and it is a great blessing. Mace Tyrell's face went from shape to shape as he heard my words, and it looked like he wanted to say some other things a few times, but then he gave up. Upon seeing this, I continued my word. We do not care what you think of us, but what we care about is for you to respect our way of life as we respect yours. Keep your religious views to yourselves, the Seven has no hold in the north, and they never will. Meanwhile, my good father intervened and began to ask me questions to soften the atmosphere. We all heard the word warg, but I, for myself, do not know what is so magical about them. I am sorry if I sound ignorant, but I really don't know anything about them. Aren't they just animal tamers? It was clear from his face and behavior that there was no malicious intent behind his reason for asking this question. The magical part about wargs does not come from taming the animals because they do not tame the animals. They are still wild animals, the wargs control them. A warg is able to connect and possess an animal's mind, then control them like a puppet. At this time, the old lion also asked a question. Is that how that raven found you in my solar? As expected of Lord Tywin, he is as sharp and observant as ever. The passing years had not yet dulled the old lion's intelligence, and he was as sharp as a Valyrian steel sword. All the other lords realized what had happened upon Lord Tywin's question. To them, receiving a message from a raven was perfectly normal, but they did not realize before that the raven didn't go to the Casterly Rock's rookery. It managed to find me in this vast castle. Exactly, he must have warged to find me inside the castle. That means they can control every animal. I am not an expert on wargs. Until a few years ago, I thought them to be stories from the Age of Heroes, but as far as I know, no, they can't control all animals. From stories, those who could control more animals are seen as powerful wargs. The most powerful one was the Warg King. He was able to bond with thousands of animals, and as for Sir Drazel's case, he has 5 animals, the Shadowcat, 2 ravens, a snake, and a dog. Especially Robert had asked many questions about wargs. After trying to answer their questions as best as possible, I said, if you're that curious about it, let's go downstairs and look at the animal with our own eyes. Honestly, I wonder how big it is too. Robert stood up quickly from his chair, drank everything in his giant goblet in one go, and then threw it on the floor. That is a good idea, Ned. Let's go and see your warg and his giant cat. When we stepped out of the Great Keep, we were at the top of the high stairs in front of the keep's gate, and at the other end of the road from the castle gate's side, we could see Aylmer and the giant animal he was riding on coming slowly up the cobblestone road. The black lines on the smoky grey fur occasionally turned into dark tawny colors with the setting sun's reflection, but the most impressive thing about the animal was its sheer size. We have seen bigger horses than it, but we have never seen an animal this size that could eat us. It was this fact that put people in shock and fear. This animal coming towards us was not a domesticated mount. It was an apex predator. As it got closer to us, its body lines could be seen more clearly. Not even its thick fur could hide the strong muscles on its shoulders and legs. I could even guess what most of us were thinking as we saw this animal coming toward us. An average adult Shadowcat could disembowel an adult man, and I don't even want to imagine what this thing could do. It stopped about 56 meters from us, stretched, and yawned. At this moment, its mouth opened so wide that maybe a child could fit inside. We could see the sharp fangs inside its gaping maw. Every one of them looked like a small dagger. Aylmer descended from the beast, placed his hand over his heart, and saluted with a bow first to the king and then to me. My king, my lord, I have carried out your orders, and all Ironborns who have attacked the north have been killed or cast into the sea. The north is free from wet rats. How many men did we lose? Around 1,000. Lord Tywin asked. How big was the invading force? Around 8 to 10,000 men. How is it possible you only lost 1,000 men against a tent-house and man army? We would have lost many more if we were not ready for them before they even stepped foot in the north. What do you mean? Aylmer raised his arm, and a raven came down from the skies and landed on his arm. I scouted them from the sky and, most of the time ambushed them, and in the major clashes, Druid Emery's powerful magic helped us. After the fight, he healed almost all of our wounded, so our losses were minimal. Chapter 126. 289 AC. POV Tywin Lannister. How can they not have any major losses when a considerable force invades them? It was hard to believe what I was hearing, but as much as I disliked the Starks, they were never talkative. The Northmen were crass and more straightforward people by nature, and a horse-sized beast was certainly right before my eyes. As if this warg brat wasn't enough, it was much harder to believe that there was another man stronger than that. I cannot allow anything to stand before me that might prevent me from the establishment of the Lannister dynasty. A setback like that can never be allowed. For years picking up after a madman and then a drunk, I finally created children who would eventually unify the Lannister bloodline to the Targaryens and Baratheons. If I cannot pull those people to my side, they have to go. One is the best scout and a spy every lord would kill for, and I am sure a dull man like Ned would squander his talent, and the other is a powerful spellcaster and a healer. Why is the North so fortunate while simpletons surround me? POV MC. After introducing myself to the lords, Lord Stark quickly told me who the other lords were, and while all the lords and King Robert were looking at Sith, Lord Tywin was looking at me like he wanted to eat me alive. Is it possible I step on his tail without realizing it? I decided to move more cautiously, but I didn't even know why he was antagonistic. While I was lost in my thought, a booming voice broke my train of thought. Boy, can we mount your beast? When the king asked that, Sith started to sound an angry growl. King's guard around him started to surround him the second the sound came and pulled their swords. Sith started using her mana, and a luster washed over her fur. Until her mana was used, those swords won't be able to hurt her that much. But because I didn't want to be declared an outlaw, I got between them. No. Sith, go wait over there. Sirs, please sheath your swords. She will not try to harm anyone. It is just that our king got a bit too close for her comfort. My king, I am sorry, but it is not possible. She might obey me, but at the end of the day, she is a wild animal. I cannot fully control the wild animal, and it will not allow anyone other than me. One of the knights said. How dare you refuse the king? Sir, I did not. If you want to endanger the king's life, you can try, but at the end of it, someone will get hurt. I am a warg. Yes, I can control the beast, but if I keep doing things the beast doesn't want, it will leave me or resist and break the bond. What do you think a giant predator is going to do after breaking its bond? The annoying knight was Lorien Lannister. I am trying to be less impulsive, but they are not letting me be. If you want to know what would happen if she got loose, you could try to kill her, and she will not attack you with her claw or fangs. I could see him underestimating Sith and seeing her as a beast. Of course, to them, she was just a beast. The king said. That could be fun. He turned to one of his king's guard and asked in a normal voice. What is his name? Lorien, my king, Lorien Lannister. Ah, he is one of yours, Lord Tywin. Yes, my lord, he is from one of the branch families. Would you allow him to fight the beast? Wouldn't it be unfair if a human puppet such a beast? I will not control it, my lord. He would be fighting just the beast, and as I said, she will not use her real weapons. Tywin looked at Lorien and nodded his head. Lorien pulled his sword and arrogantly started to approach Sith. The second I dismounted Sith, I was bullshitting all day long. Even I started to believe the thing I was saying. I acted like I was giving Sith order and said. Do not kill him. Sith, just beat the living shit out of him but do not maim him. But master, why does every human we come across want to ride me? Because they never saw a magnificent beast like you? Humph, yes, Sith is a magnificent beast, he he he. Lorien Lannister drew his sword and began walking toward Sith, grinning. At that moment, the only thing that crossed my mind, I really didn't think anyone was stupid enough to fight Sith, and this idiot would really try to fight her. Couldn't the idiot see the size difference? Sith just beat him in one hit. Sith dashed like lightning and head-butted Lorien in his chest. At this moment, Lorien was taken by surprise, as he had not anticipated that Sith would move so quickly. When Sith slammed into Lorien, he flew backward about 56 meters and began to writhe on the ground in agony. King Robert let out a thunderous laugh. I said. I am sorry, I didn't think he would take the challenge. Sir Lannister was really brave. Thank you for showing us this beast is not a pet or a toy. I pointed at a tree and said. Attack. Sith attacked a tree with a thicker trunk than our body and threw a claw strike. Thereupon, 3 claw marks about 5 centimeters deep formed on the tree. Stop! Everyone's eyes were wide open, and I could see the surrounding soldiers and knights watching uneasily. I can order her to stop or to attack without killing, but I cannot order her to be a mount. Because play fighting is in her nature, but being a mount is not. She is allowing me to mount because I raised her from a cub, and she sees me as someone higher ranking than herself. I am sorry, my king, but if we try that, she will most likely take a swipe at you. King Robert took a goblet of wine. After drinking all of it, he said. Don't sweat it. This was good enough entertainment. So, you cleaned all of the Ironborns from the north. The last time I saw you, you were a fledgling knight, and now did you become a hero of the north? I don't deserve such praise, my king. You should learn to accept praise when given. Being too humble might be seen as insincere too. Chapter 127. 289 AC. POVMC. The king sat at the foot of the stairs and asked for his wine. Then he turned to me. Who is this Druid Emery's character? He calls himself the priest of the old gods, and he comes when we need him to help the sick and the wounded. Last time he defended Bear Island against 2,000 Ironborn by himself. Of course, I helped too, but me and Sith at best killed 200, but he and his familiars killed the rest of it. Then for my help, he gifted this sword to me. A little lie and exaggeration wouldn't hurt. I had already informed Lord Stark that I was the Druid Emerys after he took the oath ritual, and I still can't forget the shock and terror he had on his face for a moment, but as an experienced warrior and a ruler, he collected himself right away. I didn't care what the Fat King thought as long as he didn't stand in my way. The second I pulled Red Rain from its sheath, every eye around me was filled with jealousy. Lord Tywin, in particular, could not take his eyes off the sword. Meanwhile, Yohn Royce said. Young knight, that sword was not that Druid's to give. That is a Valyrian steel sword. They are family heirlooms. If the drum kid he killed didn't put it as a stake, the knight's honor demands you to return it to the family that owns it. My lord, with all due respect, I am not a follower of the Seven, and I don't care what the Southern Code of Knighthood demands even if it was true. How did House Drum get to have such a sword? Did they buy it? Did they win it as a stake? I do not know how they acquired it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is the code of conduct for knights. My lord, you may not know, but I do. They acquired it by paying the iron price, as they called it. They killed the last owner. Lord Royce looked slightly offended when I said that and continued somewhat aggressively. They might not be following the code or tradition. That is why they are a treacherous lot, but this does not mean we have to be like them. At this moment, Hoster Tully also intervened and said authoritatively. I agree with Lord Royce, we must be different from those scoundrels. If we return the sword, it will be proven that we are people who respect traditions and customs. Those pieces of shit. They are jealous of my sword and that fucking cunt Hoster trying to earn prestige from my loss. I am not going to give up a magical sword just because those idiots want to. My lords, you might want to return it, but if we return it right now, it will be used against us. So if you want to do that, we should wait until the war ends if the Drum family manages to endure the war. I will return it personally. It looks like only 2 of them managed to understand the underlying meaning of my words. Lord Tywin and the king started to smirk. 2 months had passed while waiting for the royal fleet, and the week before, Lord Stannis and Lord Redwyne had defeated Euron Greyjoy's fleet after a fierce battle and were on their way to here, but Euron Greyjoy had managed to slip through their hands like a slimy eel. I haven't been idle in this time, either. Lord Drum's other 2 sons had died as a result of unfortunate accidents. One of them had been bitten by a venomous snake, and a group of ravens had caused the other poor man to fall from the castle walls. Other than that, I had an epiphany in my arcane studies. Now I was able to use my buff on 20 people at the same time, and it cost 3 times more mana. Still, it will be so useful in the future, but I was not able to apply this concept to my healing magic. Thanks to this, now I don't have to waste half of my mana to buff my familiars and men. In this region, earth mana was really strong. I think it is because of the giant gold mine here. If I could turn into Imu, I could get past the guards and enter the gold mine. I am sure there would be a better concentration of mana in there. But I am still not able to turn into small animals. In this castle, to be able to spy in a more efficient way, I have bounded with 2 mice. I named the male Nin and the female Kilim. Nin was an all-black mouse. I mean, all black, even his tail was black. Kilim, on the other hand, was reddish-brown in color. Its fur reminded me of R.O.B's curly hair. Thanks to my bond with Nin and Kilim, I got elasticity and plus 1.5 speed. This was the elasticity of a mouse. My joints were more flexible, I felt like I could squeeze through places like a mouse. Both mice started to speak with a few words in a month and dominated 60 mice each. I had basically invaded Casterly Rock. From the top room to the bottom room told them to keep investigating everywhere in the castle. They were looking under every rock and look into every nook and cranny. I had gotten out of the castle because of those lords and their stuffy talks about what they were going to do to the Ironborns. Most of them weren't even going to fight. While cruising the cliff and watching the ocean with Sith, a group started to approach us. In front of them was a big man and a young boy. This big man has grey eyes, his nose is large and hooked. But those were not his most distinctive feature, he had a giant burn scar on the left side of his face. The boy was clad in red and gold. He had green eyes and blonde curly hair, and pouty lips. He looked a bit girly for a man. It wouldn't be hard to guess who this obnoxious brat was, given what he was wearing and who was accompanying him. This must be the joy of the Baratheon dynasty and our future king, Joffrey Baratheon. He was looking at me with angry green eyes and smirking lips. God, I wanted to smack that face. Chapter 128. 289 AC. POVMC. He started ordering me to come greet him and I acted like I didn't hear him. I am talking to you, peasant. Why is this insufferable brat here? After taking a deep breath, I bowed halfway and said, Welcome, my prince, what can I do for you? While hiding behind Sandor Clegane, he said. Do you own this beast? I do not own it per se, but she listens to what I say and lets me mount her. For argument's sake, we could say I own her. He started nodding his head while looking like a complete twat. He turned towards me and started to give me the once-over. They say you have magical abilities. Show it to me. It would feel so good to smack that face. I would love to do it just once. I turned my back on them and told him to hold out a number while my head was facing the other way. You could see the fascination on his face when he asked. How are you doing that? I pointed at a raven that was perching on a branch and said. I can see things through its eyes. When he learned that, he started to act like he was not impressed and said. What kind of weak magic is that? Does that means our Colonel Master is a warg too, and he can make the dogs walk only on 2 feet? While laughing very annoyingly, he started to ask for confirmation of how funny his joke was from the hound. The hound smiled annoyedly for a millisecond and returned to his stoic face. At this moment, close to 20 Lannister soldiers came. The knight at the front said. My prince, you shouldn't leave the castle without a proper escort. After speaking to the knight in an annoyed tone, Joffrey turned to me and then said. I like this beast, and I want it, a peasant like yourself shouldn't mount such a beast. I released a little bit of mana and said in a stoic and flat voice. My prince, if you call me a peasant one more time as a knight, I have no choice but to challenge you to protect my knightly honor. The Lannister knight pulled his sword, started walking up to me, and said in an angry tone. Whom do you think you are threatening, you degenerate northern dog? At that moment, I drew my sword so fast that no one except the hound knew what was happening. Red Rain cut the knight's arm like butter, and even he couldn't comprehend that his arm was cut until it fell to the ground. Ah! I immediately took my guard and began to retreat, and all the remaining soldiers began to surround me. Sith got up and started growling with a guttural sound. The hound was busy protecting Joffrey, who was pale with fear. I do not know if this is a southern tradition to insult a knight like that and expect not to be punished. I do not want to fight with you all, but if you force me, I will kill all of you Lannister men. Does the guest right mean nothing in the south? I pointed at the knight, that was squirming in pain and said. He insulted me and paid the price. Do we have to spill more blood? I was constantly following the hound's location from the corner of my eye. Killing these 20 soldiers was child's play for me. None of them had spears. They would have to engage in close combat to engage. The only one that made me nervous was the hound, with 13.5 STR and 12.3 SPD. When I was buffed, there wasn't much difference between us in terms of speed, but there was a huge difference in strength. My STR was only 11 against his 13.5. POV Sander the Hound Clegane. The strike of this boy was fast and beautiful. In all honesty, I thought this boy was just a hot kettle, and I thought all he could do was blow hot air, but I was gravely mistaken. He had the talent of a killer. I turned and looked at the little piece of shit I had to protect, and the only thing I could feel was disgust. The only thing missing was the piss puddle under him. How could Lord Tywin have such a pissant grandkid, and he looks nothing like the king? He is not called the Demon of the Trident for no reason, and it looks like even a lion could sire a pussycat. I would like to fight the boy, but that giant cat was making me uncomfortable. If half the stories I heard about it were true, it was a deadly weapon, and I don't want anything to happen to this pissant. I turned to the soldiers and said, "You guys put those swords back in their place and step back before losing some of your limbs. That idiot insulted a knight and got what he deserved. We do not take orders from you, hound. Even though I'm used to this kind of disrespect from other knights, it doesn't mean I will accept it from nobodies like these. I hated the hypocrisy of knighthood ever since a creature like my brother, the Mountain, was knighted, and this is why I will never take the knight's oath." I stepped up and placed my elbow on the face of the knight who had said those words to me, and he fell to the ground with his nose broken. Joffrey, realizing that Sir Drazzle would not harm him, again began to act as if he was fearless. "Sir Drazzle, if you bow before me and beg forgiveness, I will prevent my soldiers from tearing you to pieces." "I am sorry, my prince, but I did not do anything that warrants an apology. I defended my honor against a disrespecting knight. If this knight has a problem with me, he should seek justice from the lords and the king. Does this idiot not have eyes? If he wants to kill you, I am not sure we can prevent it, even if he has no malicious intent. We do not have the manpower to overpower his beast, but I can definitely take him out." One of the knights charged at the beast, and I couldn't believe what I saw. The sword couldn't penetrate its fur and only annoyed the beast. The beast opened its giant maw, bit the man's head off, then ripped the rest open and munched on it like a carved turkey. At that moment, everyone other than Joffrey lost their will to fight. All I could see in his eyes was wonder. He enjoyed the scene. This sick bastard was fascinated by seeing a man getting eaten by a beast. He was pissing himself a moment ago because he thought he was in danger, and now he knew nobody was going to hurt him. He was getting off by what he saw. Chapter 129. 289 AC. POV MC. I am trying to be less edgy and aggressive, but people are not allowing me to. I can't just take disrespect from a southern knight as a hero of the north. The hound managed to defuse the situation, and everyone backed off after seeing Sith eat a man alive, but at that moment, Joffrey stepped up and started talking arrogantly. "Hey you, from now on, this beast is mine. You can go and get paid by my grandfather." I sighed deeply and said, "It doesn't work like that, my prince. This is not a pet, it is a wild animal. She would have ripped all of you apart if I were not here, and she is not up for sale." He looked angry, and with every passing second, he got angrier. It was like a baby getting ready to throw a temper tantrum. He turned to the hound and said, "Hound, kill this boy and chain the beast. That is an order from your prince. Do you want to die?" The hound's question shook him a bit, and you could see the confusion on his face. "Did you not see what that beast did to your man and what your man's sword couldn't do to the beast?" It looks like, at that moment, he realized the sword couldn't cut the beast. Because of all the commotion, people started to gather here. Seeing this, Joffrey got bolder, and he just walked up to Sith and grabbed her saddle while trying to mount her. I said to Sith, "Don't maim him, or it will become annoying." Before anyone could prevent what was happening, Joffrey got hit right across his face with Sith's thick tail. The tail slammed on his face like a big log and broke his nose. He started crying and shouting death threats. "I told you not to maim him." "Master, I didn't. How could I know he was so weak and squishy? I just softly pushed him with my tail. Why are all those strong men listening to this weakling? I thought he was strong like other men." She pointed at the half-eaten carcass with her head while licking her blood-stained lips and said, "That man was stronger than the Ironborn, his sword strike hurt like hell. So, I thought he was strong too. Why are you bowing down to such a weak man? Because of who his father is. Think like this, do you think Ned Stark is more powerful than us? No, we can just kill him. Why are we not doing that? Because he has many, many soldiers, and we want to create our own territory. Yes, that is close enough. This weakling's father is the master of Ned Stark. She stopped for a second and thought about what I said and said. So, he is the biggest pack leader. My familiars are really smart. Most of them are as intelligent as 9 old kids, and I think Poe is more intelligent than that, but they do not understand human social structure. Because, to them, the most powerful one should create the rules. Yes, something like that. In time you will understand. Then, are we going to act like we belong to their pack until we are strong enough? As I said, they are smart. Yes, we are. Then did I do bad by hurting that weak cub? Yes, it got a bit annoying. I might have to cage you for a few days until this is sorted out. But master, I don't like close spaces. I might be able to turn this into a win for the north. In a few minutes, we were surrounded by all the knights and lords. Lord Stark and King had come. Our good queen was crying murder when she saw what happened to her golden boy. Lord Stark ordered me to be put under house arrest until what happened was investigated. Right after me, Lord Stark entered the room and closed the door. What were you thinking? Hurting the prince. Now Robert has to execute you or your beast. Because you are a northern hero, he can't do that just before a war, and technically you didn't do anything wrong other than defending your honor. But it is a different case for your beast. It is already put in a lion cage of Lannisters, and it is not getting out of there alive. Do not worry, my lord. Nothing is going to happen. Hearing this, Lord Stark became more agitated rather than relieved. Why, what are you going to do now? Nothing, Sir Drazzle cannot do anything against his king, so I am not going to do anything. Even if I beg him, he won't spare Sith to save his face. He looked more confused and said. Then why are you looking that relaxed? I do not believe for a second you will leave your pet to die. My lord, she is not a mere pet to me. She is a friend, and of course, she is not going to die. If you are expecting me to save her, I cannot. Of course, I do not expect anything from you other than to set the stage, and someone more powerful than the hero of the North will take the stage. It looks like, at that moment, it dawned on him. Your other persona, Druid Emery's. Exactly. I will not be a part of such a dishonesty. This time I was a bit angry about Lord Stark's obsession with honor. What is it dishonest about it, my lord? To raise the honor of the North or to raise the glory of the old gods? Were your powers really given by the old gods? That is what I believe. My lord, I have a dream of a strong North. A North that is able to stand on its own legs without begging the Reaches or Riverland's posh lords. That is my dream, and I am going to work on this dream with or without your support. This is the will of the old gods. Lord Stark was deep in thought for a while and said. I will help you if you swear that you will not harm our King Robert. I swear I won't hurt him. Not like that, swear with the oath ritual. Okay. I drew an oath ritual circle on the ground, and we both entered the circle. I swear I will not harm King Robert or anyone of his blood in tomorrow's court. Chapter 130. 289 AC. POV Robert Baratheon. I have welcomed another annoying day of court today. It was getting so much fun. It was just like the old times. We are just a week away from the invasion of Iron Island, and my golden bitch wants me to kill someone seen as the hero of the North, and for what? Defending his knightly honor. That idiot Lannister knight openly mocked a northern knight with his words. If anyone other than Ned was the paramount of the North, we would be having a court about the execution of that knight. I can't punish Aemir, but even if my idiot son deserved that hit, it is a fact a subject can't hit their ruler, I have to at least execute his pet. It is such waste that beast would be a force to reckon with in a battle, and I was really looking forward to seeing it in action. Everyone was starting to take their place. My good queen and our whiny son were here too. It was pathetic, he was still crying about a hit to his face even after a day's passing. I don't understand how I could have a son like him, but on the other hand, my father had a son like Renly. I still have a hard time believing my own brother is a sword swallower. As the court started, all the lords started to bicker like bitches in a brothel. After half an hour of needless bickering, at last, the time comes for the sentencing. I raised my hand to silence them all, and suddenly there was silence. There is no need to call for Sir Drazzle, and he didn't do anything warranting a punishment. Cersei jumped up from her place and was about to object, but I pointed at her and said in a furious voice. Silence, woman! I am talking here. When I'm saying my piece, there isn't a place for you to say any words on top of mine. As the king of the seven kingdoms, I cannot punish a knight when all he is doing is defending his honor against malicious words. That is my final verdict about Sir Drazzle, but things are different for his pet. The pet hurt the crown prince, and that is a crime without any excuse. So, I sent in. Just before I could finish my words, a big golden eagle swooped down and turned into a man covered with moss, branches, and leaves. He had a wooden mask shaped like an old man's face and a long beard made of moss and leaves. When he talked, the mask moved like a real face. It was a bit unnerving to see, and I was so shocked that I didn't know what to do. Greetings to everyone here, I am Druid Emrys, priest of the old gods. All those who had been frozen came to their senses after a few seconds, and one of the first to wake up was Sir Selmy, who leaped briskly before me and drew his sword and aimed it at the Druid. For now, there is no reason to be on the defense against me. Right now, I am here as a friend to all those who are respectful to the old gods. I'm just here to prevent the king of the Andals and Roynars from making a big mistake against the old gods. Hearing what he said made me sneer at him. Most people didn't realize what he did. He basically threatened me and declared me as the king of Andals and Roynars, that is all, not the first men. Sir Selmy must have noticed what had happened, for he sternly suggested to the Druid. Druid Emrys, please use the proper titles for our king. He is also the king of the first men. I am sorry I didn't know he was a descendant of the Green Hand or the Winter King. Sir Selmy hesitantly replied. He is. He is not a descent of neither. Then I am confused. Is he a believer of the old gods? He is the defender of faith and devout believer of the seven. Then I am more confused. How can someone like that? Ah, never mind. We are not here for that, King Robert. I am here today to deliver a message from the old gods. Is this man declaring he can talk to the gods? We can see from his entrance he is no mummer but a message from the gods. Don't get me wrong, I cannot talk to the gods, but they can send images and messages to me, we call them green dreams. Anyway, from what I gather, you were getting ready to spit on the face of the old gods. Is that true? I was getting more confused by the second this Druid was jumping from one subject to another without any notice. Just a second ago, he challenged my legitimacy, and now he was trying to alienate the northern men against me. I was not doing such a thing, and if you keep talking in such a disrespectful way, I have no other choice but to punish you even if you really are the priest of the old gods. A priest cannot talk to his king like such. Ah, yes. A priest cannot talk to his king like that, but I do not have a king. The only ones I listen to are the old gods, and other than them, no one can order me around. You insolent! Mandon Moore must have had enough upon my shout. He attacked the Druid, but what came next was more frightening. Zagan Jelms, call lightning, dot. Suddenly, a giant lightning bolt struck Sir Moore's head in this clear sky, and his completely charred body fell to the ground. Everyone remained silent as if they had swallowed their tongues, and Sir Selmy's shout broke the veil of silence. Protect the king, attack! The Druid turned into an eagle again, landed on one of the buildings, and turned into a human again. Meanwhile, the Lannister archers that filled around us started attacking with their bows and crossbows, but the Druid stood on the roof as if nothing had happened and none of the arrows hit him. The Druid brought his hand to his mouth and pretended to yawn, then gestured with his hands as if to tell us to calm down. Please calm down. I don't want to hurt anyone, but if you keep attacking me, you give me no choice but to defend myself seriously. He just killed one of the deadliest fighters in Westeros, and he wasn't even fighting seriously. Chapter 131. 289 AC. POV Robert Baratheon. My knights were trying to protect me, but I scrambled through them and shouted toward the Druid. Druid! You didn't seem very friendly when you killed one of my king's guards. My king, if you can't put a leash on your dogs, all I can do is put them down. Let's put all of this behind us. You would be long dead if I were here to kill you. He turned into an eagle again and landed on the ground when my men charged at him. He melted into the ground and dissipated. After a few more seconds, something pulled me into the ground up to my waist, and I wasn't able to move when the thing grabbed me. I was frozen stiff. It lasted for a few more seconds. Everyone around me was panicking. They were trying to pull me out of the ground, but I was stuck. Then an eagle flew out of the ground and landed on one of the roofs. My king, you should stay where you are until we are done here, and I think I made perfectly clear that if I wanted to kill you, you would be long dead. He was right about everything he said. So, I shouted in anger at my soldiers. Stop! Just stop. I was fuming with anger, and I just kept struggling, and even if I broke my legs, I was going to get out of this dirt. I was the king of the 7 kingdoms, and I wasn't going to bow down in front of this druid. My king, you are going to break your legs. Then the land around me started to retreat, and now I was in a hole. My knights pulled me out of it. They were trying to protect me, but I pushed them aside and walked up to my chair in the middle of the square. I sat down and said, "Now, say what you want to say, Druid. I never once disrespected the old gods. Explain yourself, what you meant by spitting on their face. My king, were you not about to kill this sacred animal?" POVMC. That was close. Almost everything got out of hand. I should thank our king. I am thankful that he is a fearless bull-headed creature. If he had run, it would have ruined my plans. I acted too impulsive again. I should have used a non-lethal spell on that king's guard. While I was deep in thought, the king said, "Yes, I was going to. Why should that be spitting to the face of the old gods? As I said, this is a blessed animal that the old gods sent to Seagard. As a warg, he is chosen warrior of the old gods. If you kill such a blessed creature without reason, that is nothing but a spit onto the face of the old gods. The beast attacked my son and killed one of the defending knights. How is that without reason? Are you telling me that beast attacked your son, and he still breathes without any serious wound? Then you must have lost at least 200 men until you caged the beast or to keep your son safe from it." "I did not, its owner put it in there." "How did the beast attack your son?" "I don't know that either." "You didn't even investigate that, you were going to kill a warg's bond. That is a disrespect to the old gods. We druids and wargs get our powers from our noble bloodline that served the old gods. Being a warg is a blessing, becoming a warg's bond makes the beast a blessed beast. But there are some beasts that are already blessed from birth like this one here or my bonds." I raised my hands to the air and summoned Poe and Erebus. 2 blackbirds bigger than eagles appeared. As you can see, they are ravens but bigger than golden eagles. Trying to kill a sacred animal such as this one is a disrespect I cannot accept. And I cannot accept a beast to go unpunished after hurting my son. What are we going to do? We are going to find out who was at fault? If the beast really did attack without provocation, I will execute it with my own hands. If not, what are we going to do? If it is innocent, it will go free. I already know the beast is innocent. If it was not, the old gods wouldn't send me here. Are you saying my son is a liar? If that is the alternative, then yes, he is a liar and, from what I see, a coward too. It looks like even the most powerful and noble of beasts could sire a mutt." The queen started shouting orders to the Lannister men. "Kill this commoner right away! How dare you insult the crown prince!" But no one was moving. All the Lannister men looked at Tywin, and he signalled for them to stand down. The king thundered, "Silence! Woman, did I not warn you not to talk on top of my words?" Then the king ordered King's Guard to escort the queen to her room. The king looked at me with fuming anger but then laughed thunderously. "I like your guts, but at the same time, I want to spill them. Ha 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 ha." I turned to Joffrey and asked, "Now, child, tell us the truth of what happened." "That beast tried to kill me." I sighed heavily and said to the king, "My king, did you witness the beast's power?" "I saw a demonstration of its power." "Then I ask you, do you think your son speaks the truth?" Robert turned to Joffrey and said in a voice only they could hear, but I listened in, thanks to my enhanced hearing. "Joffrey, if you tell such a blatant lie again, I will break both of your legs. Do you understand me, boy?" He was already pale-skinned, but his color got paler after hearing what was said, and he nodded. "It attacked me with its tail. As you heard, it attacked my son. The reason does not matter to me, a subject cannot attack its ruler. Are you acting like this because I keep calling you my king? Let me show you the gravity of the situation." I raised both of my hands in the air and started shouting, "Old gods of nature, please help your pitiful servant and show your presence and wrath to those who deserve it." I had managed to create this spell last month, but it wasn't powerful enough to bring a strong castle like Casterly Rock down, but it would be enough for a scare tactic. Tegon Tremo, earthquake. The earth under us started to shake, and the intensity of the shaking was increasing. This spell created an earthquake at a power of 45 magnitudes in an area of 1 kilometer, and every second I had to spend 20 mana. I could only channel this spell for 8 seconds, and it would cost 160 mana. Under normal circumstances, it would be a waste of mana, but here it would be a good scare for them. Everyone around us started screaming in fear, and some of them kneeled and prayed to the seven, but the effect it had on the Northmen was a bit different. On the faces of the Northerners, rather than fear, there was admiration and worship. I had only 100 mana left, but it was worth it. Even on the face of the king, there was an iota of fear. My king Sith is not a pet, she is a wild animal. What do you think will happen if you provoke a wild animal? My prince, why did the animal attack you? I didn't do anything. Should I send a lightning onto him, the spell would fail, but it would still cause an enormous clap of thunder. Zagan Jelms, call lightning, dot. The mana flowed through me, and I could feel the spell forming, but something was wrong, the spell was not failing. At the last second, I spent more mana and tried to change the spell's trajectory. I had to spend 3 times the spell's worth of mana to change its target by a few meters. The lightning falls 3 meters in front of Joffrey, and he nearly pisses himself and screams for his mother. I still can't understand how it is possible for the spell to work. Today I should not be able to hurt the king and his family. When I pulled the king into the ground, I didn't free him. Before I could act, my spell cancelled itself before he got hurt. The same should have happened to the prince. The spell should have cancelled itself before it even initiated the attack. At that moment, a theory formed in my mind, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is usually the right one. I had to investigate this. I got pulled out of my thoughts by the prince's shrill screams. I tried to mount it, I am the prince of the 7 kingdoms, you cannot treat me like this. I am more deserving than that peasant tree-hugging barbarian that calls himself a knight. My king, I have nothing more to say, I leave the verdict to your just words, and lastly, I would like to add that the North remembers how our good prince thinks of our knights and how other kingdoms use our weak moments against us. At that moment, from the sides of where the northern lords and soldiers were standing came many voices that said, "The North remembers." After that, more voices started to join in until it became a chant. But it slowly died out when Lord Stark shouted for them to stop. The king said in a sour voice, "Release the damn beast." "Thank you, my king, for your just words, and to thank you, I will open up the gates of iron-born castles when your man disembarks from their ships." I turned into an eagle and flew away with Poe and Erebus. Chapter 132. 289 AC. POV Robert Baratheon. There was only one moment in my life when I was more pissed off than right now when I found out that Targaryen bastard had kidnapped Lyanna, but today could contest with that day. When Cersei, Joffrey, Tywin and I entered the throne room, I turned angrily toward Joffrey. The boy flinched and hid behind his mother. I didn't know what to do with this rage, I was going to boil over. I grabbed one of the tables at the edge of the room with all my strength to vent my anger, and I could feel the boards on the edge of the table starting to crumble in my palm, but my anger was growing rather than diminishing. "Boy, if you continue to hide behind your mother like a cunt, I will break every bone in your body. Come out and stand like a man." Hieg. With a terrified face, he squealed like a frightened pig and came toward the middle of the room. With this overflowing wrath, I lifted the giant table and threw it at Joffrey. He screamed and dodged out of the way. This time Cersei started to scream at me and shielded the boy. I pointed at her and then said, You are the reason this boy turned into such a cowardly cunt. How is it possible this whiny little thing is my son?" I charged at the boy, pushed Cersei out of the way, and grabbed him by the neck. POV third person. The king was fuming with anger, and Joffrey was about to piss himself and faint. Tywin was standing at the side of the room, thinking about what he had to do about that druid. He might be a strong ally but a stronger enemy. He didn't care what was happening in this room. He didn't care what was going to happen to Joffrey or Cersei because he had Tommen for spare. As long as someone with Lannister blood sits on that throne next, he doesn't care who that is. "You idiotic boy, are you trying to sabotage my campaign? How dare you utter those words in front of all those people? You almost cost me 20,000 men, and 20,000 northern soldiers are worth 2 times southern soldiers." He slapped Joffrey and said, "I don't care what you do in your time or how you feel about other kingdoms, but if you openly insult them like this again, I will pull your tongue out with my own hands. Tywin, I want that knight's head. How dare he attack a knight that is protected by the guest's rights?" Cersei said. "We could say he didn't break the guest's rights, we could say he was defending the prince. Do you really think the northern lord's going to accept that? If you can't control your dogs, you know they have to be put down. Robert turned to Tywin and said. He already lost his sword arm, just cut his head off, and nothing is going to happen to that damned beast until my campaign is finished. Do you understand me? No one is going to jeopardize my campaign, my war, ever again. Tywin waited for the king to calm down a bit and gestured for Cersei to get out of there with Joffrey. He gestured for the servants to serve some wine to the king. He sat calmly in one of the chairs and waited for Robert to finish a pitcher of wine. During this time, he was making many plans and breaking them in his mind repeatedly because he knew nothing about the Druid. After the king calmed down a bit, he asked. My king, what are you going to do about that Druid? What can we do? He can call lightning and cause earthquakes. Should we shoot down every golden eagle we see, or should we stop walking on top of the ground? I don't think he can cause a quake strong enough to level castles. If he had that kind of power, he wouldn't only shake Casterly Rock and would have at least leveled a few buildings. Are you saying he was bluffing? Do you want to ask that to Mander more? He fried the poor man. Please forgive my crass words, but if he were that invincible, he would be the one sitting on the Iron Throne. Why do we only hear about him now? I don't believe for a second he is here to help in the war. Robert was beginning to think there was truth in Tywin's words, but he was not going to test it today. All he wanted was to wage war and crack up some skulls. We should call for Ned Stark and ask him about all this. Robert nodded, and one of the King's Guard left to find Ned Stark. Ned hated that Robert was humiliated, but he couldn't help but be a bit proud to be a Northman. Ned, how is your army's morale? Are they ready for war? Robert asked this question with a heavy heart and didn't want to lose the Northmen, who were the best vanguard army. They are eager to fight for you, my king. Ned, do not offer me flowery words and tell me the truth. Ned sighed and said. They are angry about the prince's opinion about us and our religion, but we will fulfill our oath as the Northmen. Then tell me everything you know about this Druid. Ned told them about all he knew, and that wasn't much. He told about the Druid healing thousands of sick people and treating their wounds. To the Northmen, he continues to be someone to look up to. A few years ago, he came out of nowhere. He told them about how he saved Bear Island and how he killed thousands of Ironborn. As he told them about Druid's accomplishments, the air in the room started to get heavier. Robert angrily said. What is he planning? I asked him the exact same thing, and he said old gods sent him to help the North flourish. You talked to him before? Yes, before I came out of Winterfell, he came to me and said he would help defend the North, but I didn't take him seriously then. At that time, he was just some healer. Ned didn't like all those deceptions, but in its essence, he wasn't lying. That is what Aemir told him, and that is what he wanted to believe. After all that hardship that the North had to endure, it was about time for some good days to come. He wanted to believe that the old gods were protecting them. At this time, a small black mouse was watching what was happening. Chapter 133. 290 AC. After what happened at Casterly Rock, all of Westeros was shaking with the news of magic coming back to the lands. Every spy in the land had started to move to the north, so their lord could learn more about this Druid. Many ravens were flying in every direction carrying the news. Every time people see Sith, they would start whispering about things. The beast became a slap to the faces of the Seven and the king. At the same time, the beast had turned into a badge of honor for the Northmen. It had been a week, and Aemir was released from his house arrest. Stannis had reached Lannisport after defeating Euron Greyjoy and his fleet. The fleet had split in two, half of the soldiers boarding from Lannisport and the other half to begin the attack by Seagard. The Riverland and North armies were already started their assault from Seagard, but there was no one attacking Pike. Robert had ordered to leave Pike for last. So, the island was besieged, awaiting its fate. On the other hand, Aeron and Victarion Greyjoy's fleet realized that they were defeated, and instead of helping Bellin, they decided to flee in the north direction, but before them stood the armies of Riverland and North. POVMC. We were getting close to a fight in the sea, I didn't have any experience of that. Poe and Erebus were prowling the sky. Immu poked his head out of my shirt and said sadly. I hate the sea. Master, when are we going to reach land? It looks like we have to have a fight in the sea. Hearing this, Immu entered the shirt sadly. I made my way over to Sith, who was calmly lying on the edge of the ship and rechecked my stuff in the saddle. I had already given Harla and Keegan's armor to them, and they were as happy as children on Christmas Day. I also bought a gift for myself but haven't had the opportunity to use it yet. When I was in Winterfell, I had commissioned Mycon to make me a reach weapon to use when I am in mounted combat. It was a well-made double-headed crescent halberd. The weapon was good for everything stabbing, slashing, crushing, or pulling. I was ready for the clash. The longship of the Ironborn was charging toward us, and Lord Stark was shouting orders. The second the fighting had started, I used my mass buffing ritual on myself, Keegan, Harlech, and Sith. When the Ironborn was close, both sides started raining arrows at each other. Another wet rat had bitten the dust with every one of my arrows. While we were fighting with one ship, another one was approaching us from behind. I turned to the other side and started raining down arrows onto the other ship. Seeing me, some of the archers started changing targets too. Sith, Keegan, and Harlech were slaughtering other ships without a problem. Especially Harlech had turned into a behemoth with his new armor, and thanks to my Oakshield spell, he didn't have weak points in his armor, but I warned them about the Valyrian steel swords. Our ship was starting to get overrun because we were attacked from both sides. So, I pulled Red Rain, took up my shield, and joined the fray. I didn't have to think about the other side since my men were there, but Stark men were starting to be pushed back on this side. Man of the North, did you come here to be pushed around by those wet rats? Old Golds are looking at us right now, witnessing our pathetic performance. For the North, for the old gods. Charge! After saying that, I jumped from the side railings to the Ironborn ship. I was trying to strike, but from everywhere, a spear or sword approached me. After 10 minutes of fighting, I wasn't able to find a place to put my foot. The floor was full of corpses. We were victorious, but another Ironborn ship was trying to get past us before we could celebrate. They were trying to run out of the blockade. This ship was a bit different from most ships. Like most ships, it had a black sail and a golden kraken, but its figurehead was a kraken, too, and this ship had a big ram on its front. One of the sailors shouted, "Iron Victory, that is the flagship of Iron Fleet, that is the ship of Victarion Greyjoy." Like me and my men, Victarion was not afraid to wear full plate armor on the sea. Every other man on this ship was wearing leather armor, but we were wearing heavy armor because I was not afraid to fall into the sea. I had an air bubble spell, but Victarion believed Drown God would protect him. Of course, when Stark men asked if we were not afraid to drown, we had said old gods would protect us too. After seeing wargs and magic swords, I knew for a fact there were magical beings in this world. I had to be cautious when fighting this Greyjoy. Was he crazy, or was he really protected? They were trying to outrun us, but it was not going to be that easy. I came to the edge of the ship, away from the other men, and whispered, "Idarmin Calcium, summon minor water elemental, ... I summoned a water elemental. It looked like a snake made out of water, and its size was 2 times bigger than usual. I don't think my magic has grown since my last casting. Could it be because we are in the middle of the sea and the water element is at its strongest? Go and slow that ship down." The elemental submerged into the water, making it impossible to see. POV Aaron Greyjoy. Men, as you can see, Drown God is on our side. Those dry feet bastards could not contest with us in the sea. Today we lost because we were arrogant, not because Drown God forsaken us. We will avenge this humiliation. Victarion, next to me, started praying in a whispering voice. "Oh, great Drown God, why have you abandoned our house? Did we not serve you faithfully?" In an angry voice, I said, "Brother, I do not want to hear such blasphemous words from your mouth ever again. We cannot know his deep plans, we cannot know what he is thinking. How dare you say he abandoned us? Never, never lose your faith. From 300 ships, only 5 were left, and we were still being chased, but they won't be able to catch us and give up. Drown God did not abandon us and will not." As I said that, the ship shook and began to slow down. POV third person. Iron Victory was slowing down not much, but just enough for them to be caught. Ironborn on the ship started to panic. Aaron and Victarion were shouting orders, and Ironborns were fixing the mast and whipping the thralls harder so they would row harder, but it was no use, the distance between them kept getting smaller. Victarion finally made up his mind and would fight to the last man if necessary, running away wasn't his thing anyway. Chapter 134. 290 AC. POV third person. The two ships were getting too close to each other, Stark men were throwing hooks at the Iron Victory, and Ironborns were trying to cut them, but they were not fast enough. Eomer could feel his water elemental running out of mana, trying to stop the ship, but even if it were unsummoned, the ship wouldn't be able to run away anymore. Eventually, the two ships locked at each other, and the Stark soldiers began to charge the Iron Victory, but at that moment, Victarion landed on Eomer's ship, knocking all the charging soldiers down like a bull that had broken its chains. Immediately afterward, Ironborns charged with a burning zeal. Eomer looked at Victarion's stats. He was a powerful man. He had 15 STR and 10 SPD, and like Eomer, he was clad in armor head to toe. His long, messy hair mixed with his long beard and overflowed from under his crocken-shaped helm. On the one hand, he had a big black axe, on the other hand, he had a shield with their house sigil. His axe was as big as a two-handed one, but he had no problem swinging that beast with one hand because he was so strong. He saw the red rain on Eomer's hand and started smirking. "So, you are the one that killed the drum kid. I will be taking that sword back from your corpse." He charged at him with his shield, and the second the two shields clashed, Eomer was pushed back. It was a bad idea on Eomer's part to try to do a contest of strength with the man, but he didn't have much of a choice in this cramped place, and he couldn't always dodge his attacks and do wide movements. Seeing he was superior to him in strength, Victarion kept charging. With every clash, he was getting more confident of his victory, but Eomer was not stupid. He knew he couldn't beat him in strength, and his superior speed didn't mean too much if there wasn't any space to display it. So, he was baiting Victarion. After one more clash, Eomer faked a stumble. Victarion used the beard of his axe, hooked Eomer's shield, and tried to pull it down to do the finishing strike, but the second Victarion hooked his shield, Eomer charged. Using his shield, Eomer forced Victarion's axe hand up and pushed Victarion's shield aside. Victarion arrogantly smirked because Eomer couldn't push him back more than one step. Pathetic. Victarion grabbed Eomer's shield just as he was about to push him to the side, and Eomer kneed him right in the groin. Eomer's plan never was to push him aside or anything. All he wanted to do was get close to him while lowering his guard, and Eomer accomplished what he wanted. The second Eomer saw Victarion's stats. He knew he had to do something different. If he was in an open place like when he fought Smaljin Umber, he could have danced around him using his speed, but in this little space, it would be like signing his death warrant. The second his knee connected with Victarion's family jewels, Victarion folded like a chair. Usually, the codpiece would protect the groin against damage, but Eomer was not an ordinary man. He had higher strength, and a magical armor encased his body with his plate armor. The blunt force created from this caused great pain to Victarion, and his family jewels were a bit bruised but still safe. Using that opening, Eomer didn't give him any time to respite. He cut his arm deeply between his joint plates. The chainmail at the joint couldn't stop the Valyrian steel sword. Ahhh! Victarion had lost his axe. Eomer followed up with an overhead strike, but he defended using his shield, and Eomer kicked the shield aside. He was getting ready to land his last strike, but an Ironborn jumped on him at that moment. No, the correct depiction would be he jumped on his sword. The Ironborn, while mumbling something, jumped on Eomer's sword and saved Victarion's life. That Ironborn was impaled by the red rain and died, but he had saved Victarion's life. Victarion was fuming with anger. He tried to charge at Eomer, but two Ironborn held him and dragged him back to the ship under the order of Aeron Greyjoy. Protect the captain. What is dead may never die. Protect the champion of the drowned god. His work is not done yet. We cannot allow him to join the drowned one yet. No true son of the sea would want to rot beneath the ground. Fight, fight, fight and join the drowned god in his watery halls. Aeron raised his driftwood cudgel and kept ordering them to charge, but while doing that, he was getting ready to jump ships. While the fighting continued, another Ironborn ship came next to the Iron Victory and took the Greyjoy brother. That slippery eel and his bull-headed brother ran away, while other zealot Ironborns were dying chanting their mantra. Eomer said in a disgusted voice. I hate zealot Ironborns. They are such a hassle to fight. POV Robert Baratheon. I wasn't able to contain myself. At last, I was on a ship to crush some wet rats, but there was one thing heavy on my heart. What was I going to do with this druid? He looked honorable, but you can never know with men of power. When you have power, you tend to greed for more. I think there's nothing to fear as long as we don't see this druid on this side of the neck, but if he even steps into Riverland, this will show he has a bigger plan for the realm. For now, he is using the war as a reason to travel to the Westerlands and Riverlands. If, after the war, he retreats into the north, I wouldn't have any problems. When I looked up, Salt Cliff was right in front of us. My heart rate was getting higher and higher, and my blood was almost boiling. I gripped my warhammer tightly. I didn't want this war to be over right away. That is why I ordered the suppression of all Iron Island, and I want Bellin to suffocate while waiting for my hammer. The Northern Army attacked Harla, while Riverland was to attack Orkmont and Black Tide. Westerlands and Reach were going for Great Wyke, Crownland and Stormland's troops were first going to suppress Salt Cliff, then go for Pike. House Sunderly and House Salt Cliff were going to be the first to taste my hammer. We started disembarking. The island was like a deserted one. All the villages and settlements were abandoned. They must have retreated to the 2 castles on this island. House Sunderly was closest to us, and they will fall first. Chapter 135. 290 AC. POV Robert Baratheon. The walls of Sunderly's castle were not high and were made of wood. We were slowly approaching them, and screams of panic rose from behind the walls. The Ironborns had lost most of their soldiers in the roots they had suffered in the north and south. That's why they had half as many soldiers in their castles at best. Just as we were about to start attacking, a giant black bird caught over us and began to move toward House Sunderly's castle. The bird started to rise as it approached the castle, and it had risen as high as possible, then dived like lightning. This bird hadn't even touched the castle gates, but the gate shook with a big bang as if a ram's head had hit it. Bam! This bird was constantly rising and diving again, and the gate shook with a great bang every time. In panicked haste, Sunderly's men fired many arrows at the bird, but none of the arrows hit it. It was as if the arrows were changing their trajectories so they wouldn't hit the bird. After every dive, the gate was getting more damaged. After the 5th dive, the gate shattered and opened. The bird changed direction and began to approach us. Voices began to rise from among my men. The Druid, he is helping us. The bird landed in the clearing before me as the soldiers stared at the shattered gate in amazement. This bird was almost as big as a teen. It was definitely one of the birds the Druid conjured at the Casterly rock. I have never seen a raven that big ever in my life. The bird got close to me, and my knights put their hands on their swords and began to create a wall before me. Let it through. If the Druid wanted to hurt me, it wouldn't land. The bird was right in front of me. It opened its giant wings. When it spread both wings fully, it was bigger than my royal carriage. What it did next was fascinating. It brought one wing forward and bowed in salute. After that, the bird flew away. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to do. Everyone who saw this froze. As soon as I came to my senses, I held up my hammer and shouted as high as I could. Charge! With my roar, all my men came to their senses and began to attack, shouting excitedly among themselves as they ran. The Druid showed respect to the king and helped us. Yes, he helped us as he said he would, but at the same time, this was a show of force. Most of my men didn't even manage to comprehend this. Sir Selmy approached me and said in a low voice. My king, do you think he did this only to help us? It looks like getting old hadn't yet dulled Sir Selmy's keen senses. That is my thought exactly. POVMC. We defeated Victarion Greyjoy and his soldiers, but both brothers managed to escape. I didn't mind letting the frightened rat run away. If I wanted to catch them, I had to expose my real power to catch them, and I was not ready. Until I was sure there weren't any more powerful casters on this continent. Druid Emery's persona was going to be my last line of defense, and it was so useful. Now if I needed to put a noble or royal in their place, I could just use him. I didn't have to create enemies for myself. After I was good and ready, I wouldn't care if they knew the Druid was me, but until then, he would be my red herring. After the death of Lyca, I was always trying to be more cautious and more in control, but sometimes it was like I was not in control and exploded with anger. I hate being a pubescent teen. I know I fucked up, but until I cool down, I don't realize what I have done. I didn't want to kill that King's Guard a few weeks ago. I just lashed out. I realized what I did, but it was already too late. Brain chemistry was a bitch, and I had to be more in control. As Airmer, I had already made Glovers an enemy, and I didn't need more enemies, especially in the north. In half an hour, we would be at Harla. Our battle plan is to attack at House Valmark first, then clean the other minor houses while leaving the 10 towers for the last. House Valmark is the strongest pledge of House Harla. If we attack the Harlas first, the other houses have to rally and help their overlord, but before they rally, if we can down one or more of them, it would be a better fight for us. We were inside the captain's quarters of the galley. Lord Stark, Harla, Keegan, and I were in the room. Lord Stark looked up from the map and said, "Are you sure you can destroy the gate of House Valmark's castle?" "As Druid Emrys, I can, but my lord, until I come back, you need to act like you are having a discussion with me. So, no one will realize Druid Emrys only appears when I disappear. As we discussed, you should order the army to attack the second they landed so Valmarks wouldn't have time to barricade the broken door. You and I would join the fighting a few minutes late." I opened the big window and flew out of it. After coming to the shore, I found a small grove, and after landing, I disguised as Druid Emrys using the surrounding vegetation. After I was ready, I turned into an eagle and flew toward House Valmark's castle. I started circling in the air until the Stark men were in range to see me. I landed and started readying my spells. Seeing a bird transformed into a man, Valmark's men were shouting in panic and fright. "Ajoman anima, wildfire spirit!" I first summoned the wildfire spirit so my fire magic would be more potent. While I was training, I discovered a new way of casting that I called combination magic. I was able to cast this spell at most with level 2 spells, and casting was taking a lot of time, but the power level was a bit stronger than my level 4 spells, so it was worth it, and I didn't have any spell that would do the same kind of damage. After summoning the wildfire spirit, I cast a level 2 fireball spell in both hands. Perses, fireball, Perses, fireball, dot. Just as the fireballs formed, I pushed my hands together to combine the spells. At first, this would cause an explosion, and I don't remember how many times I died inside the training space, but I managed to combine them, and now I was really good with it. My control over my mana was so much better after learning this too. After I started the combination, the spell would become unstable for a second, and at that moment, I could stabilize it, but it would make this a bit more powerful than a level 3 spell, and that was not enough. So rather than stabilizing it, I focused, kept it in an unstable state, and freed one of my hands. Using that hand, I cast a level 2 wind ball spell. Gelmio, wind ball, dot. Like before, just as the spell was forming, I pushed that spell into the unstable fireball spell. The fireball instantly expanded, all that oxygen provided by the wind ball bolstered the fireball spell. After wrestling to hold it in control for a few seconds, I managed to create a new spell. It was a fireball, but rather than a standard fireball color, it was a dark red color and 1 meter in diameter. In the training space, I tried to combine 4 of them, but it would always explode after countless deaths. I gave up thinking this was my limit for now and named this Crimson Fireball. This spell was not helpful in other situations because it took a few minutes to cast it and cost 30 mana, but it was perfect for sieges. As I condensed it, it started to create an ominous whistling sound like a pressure cooker. It cost more and more mana to hold onto it, so I released it toward the castle's gate. It flew like a cannonball, and after a tremendous explosion, it obliterated the gate. Chapter 136. 290 AC. POV third person. The Stark army was approaching the Valmark's stronghold and was about 600 meters from it. Stark soldiers crossing the hill had seen the Druid standing about 60 meters from the castle's gate. The soldiers' whole attention was focused on the Druid, and then they slowly came to a halt. Fireballs suddenly appeared inside the Druid's hands, and he combined those fireballs and started to wrestle to control the fireball. The soldiers were firing many arrows at him, but none of them reached him. The fireball had expanded instantly and turned crimson. He fired the spell, and the castle gate was destroyed by a terrible explosion. The soldiers who saw this explosion froze for a moment, but after a few seconds of surprise, the Stark commanders, who saw the gate disappear, suddenly roared. Charge! As soon as Ermer fired the spell, he turned into an eagle and started going toward the ship. He got inside the captain's quarters, turned into a human again, discarded his Druid costume, and donned his armor with Keegan's help. Harla was waiting in front of the door while Lord Stark was inside, talking with Keegan like he was me. So people would think we were having an important conversation. When Ermer returned, Lord Stark asked. What happened? Did you manage to destroy the gate? Yes, my lord, I did. For a second, he stopped talking and connected with Erebus to see what was happening. Our men are starting to charge towards the broken gate right now. If we hurry, I can reach them in time. He ordered Sith to be ready to run. After buffing Lord Stark and the two brothers, he left on top of Sith like lightning. In an instant, they disappeared on top of the hill. Lord Stark had 9 STR and 12 SPD. He wasn't all that powerful, but he was fast. After the buffs, he got a +4 on his stats. POV Ned Stark. I couldn't believe the power coursing through my body. I felt like an 18 NAME day boy again, full of power and energy. I felt light as a feather, and I could swear I could crush rocks in my hand. We got onto our horses and started galloping towards the castle, but I was not feeling the wind on my face. Like there was an invisible wall in front of me, and that wall was blocking the wind. When I asked for an explanation from the twins, they told me it was thanks to the arrow deflecting buff armor cast on me. They said it created a deflecting aura around me that would even deflect a javelin. By the time my 100 soldiers of protective detail and I had crossed the hill, all our soldiers had begun to pour in through the gate, and I could not see armor anywhere. POV MC. 15 minutes ago. Sith, use some of your mana, but don't use all of it. You are going to need it in the fight. I want to be there before they pile up in front of the gate. Yes, Master. She started to pick up speed. She wasn't going at top speed, but we were going 200 kmph, and thanks to the warding wind, I didn't feel any of the wind. We were on top of the hill in a matter of minutes, and she started charging towards the gate. The soldiers were almost there too. There were about 100 meters between the soldiers and the gate, and Sith was quickly closing in on them. At that moment, I thought of something crazy, but I thought it could work, and it would make it faster for our man to take over the gate. Sith, don't slow down, pick up speed, jump over our soldiers, and dive through the gate. But Master, I am too fast, and I will crash. Don't worry, I am going to shield you from the crash. She picked up speed. She was going to use up more of her mana, but it was only for a few seconds. She charged ahead and jumped over the soldiers without hesitation. Her trust in me was unwavering. I could see our soldiers looking up and seeing this giant cat jumping for more than 20 meter distance and diving through the gate. As we were about the crash, I cast Korsambi, Oak's Healed, on Sith's entire body and summoned an air elemental. She looked like a golem made out of bark for a second, and we crashed into the iron-born soldiers like a cannonball. Bam! With the help of the air elemental, I cast a burst of air right in front of us to cushion our crash. This created a dust cloud around us and, at the same time, deflected their spears by boosting the wind shield buff. I could hear all the agonizing cries for help and the panic in their voice. After the crash, I had dispelled all body armor on Sith's body and, like always, only put it under her barding. She had thin steel armor made of small steel plates encasing her head, chest, and backside. Then, on her legs, there were leather armor bracers. I wanted a full leather armor for her because the only reason the armor was there was so it could hide the armor spell, but Mycon looked like I was crazy for ordering something like that and refused to make one, saying he would not be the one to be responsible for causing my death. This armor slowed Sith a bit, so her top speed was 250, and she could only last for 45 with that much weight. First, I thought I should ask for a caparison rather than a barding, but this would have gotten in the way of her claw attacks. So, I gave up that idea and ordered a thin barding. Caparison is a long cloth armor for protecting a mount's legs. I had my new halberd in my hand, and I was swinging that like crazy. I had experience using spears but not with halberds. It was heavy but not as heavy as any other halberd. Its design made it possible to swing this double crescent halberd with one hand, and I liked using it. It was perfect for mounted combat. When I had used Red Rain, I was more proficient, but my range was limited, so I felt useless on top of Sith. But now I was reaping souls left and right while Sith was crushing everyone closer to us. After a few more seconds, our men started pouring in through the gate, and the defensive line of Ironborn in front of the castle gate was rooted. They were retreating to the keep in terror. After a few more minutes, Lord Stark joined the fight. With his sword and shield, he was moving among the Ironborn like a ghost. They were not able to resist him. Thanks to the speed buff, he was so fast. Some of the knights that knew how fast he was usually had stopped fighting and started staring at him with dumbfounded faces. Like always, Harla was moving through the enemies like a bulldozer with his 13 STR. On the other hand, Keegan fought in the widest areas to use his 13 SPD, stinging like a bee and floating like a butterfly. His way of combat looked like a deadly dance rather than a fight. After half an hour, we were in control of the castle, and the rest of the Valmark men had retreated into the main keep. The inside of the castle was like any other. There was a little village inside, with kitchens, workshops, gardens, stables, and a chapel for the drowned god. The design of the castle was different from the north. Because of the big snowfall in the north, all the towers had conical roofs, and the houses had steeply angled roofs, but here, like the rest of Westeros, had flat or softly angled roofs. But the biggest difference here was the lime and salt that was collecting on top of the walls because of the sea breeze. Chapter 137. 290 AC. POV third person. Lord Stark approached the walls of the keep and cried out as he gasped. Lord Volmark, let's not cause more death, surrender to us. Will you swear you will spare my and my family's life if we surrender? Aemir stepped up and came close to Ned. My lord, if we spare their life, the second we leave here, they will not honor their promise and will join up with other lords, and we can't leave men here to hold this position. You are right, but we will lose more men if we fight. He came closer to me and said. If Druid is not thinking of returning to help us, I don't want to waste my men's lives when I can prevent the fighting. Then with a louder voice, he said. Lord Volmark, let's talk about your surrender. I might not want to waste precious lives here, but if you act unreasonable, I have no other choice but to break your house. Aemir thought this was a useless bluff. My lord, they would know you wouldn't do that. They are a zealot bunch. To them, we are insulting their god, and they wouldn't even blink their eyes to die for their god. Anyone that knew Ned Stark, even a little bit, would know he would never massacre a family, and Aemir knew this wouldn't work. I don't need bluffs, Lord Stark, we all know you would never end an entire family. My men do not mind dying while defending their homes against invading forces that insult the drowned god with their presence. If you cannot offer something, we can accept. We do not mind paying the iron price. Aemir must accept that the Ironborn might be pieces of shit, but they are tenacious shits, they do not give up. The army of the north was stationed in and around the castle, a tent had been prepared for Lord Stark, and Ned was considering how they could circumvent this problem inside the tent. There wasn't much inside the tent. There was a big table in the middle with maps scattered on it. In the corner was a portable bed. Ned looked at that bed and thought he was already missing his own bed and the warmth of his wife. After a heavy sigh, he turned his attention to the maps. He wanted to achieve an outcome that would cause as few casualties as possible, but they were rebels, he couldn't just leave them as they were, or like Aemir said, they would come after us. Just then, Aemir entered the tent. Did you call for me, my lord? Yes. Do you intend to act as Druid? No, Druid is only going to act when the king or the northern army is starting the assault. I am only going to open the gate, I will not do any more fighting than that, but after the fighting, I am going to come and heal all our men. I would have asked to meet with you if you hadn't called for me. My lord, will you assign me to scout so I can leave the camp as I wish and come back as the Druid after every battle? Okay, I will do that, but what do you mean, king? How are you going to help him? I have sent one of my familiars that could destroy a castle gate, this way, I am helping him too. But you said you wanted to help the North rise up from its poor state. Why don't you help more in this war? Because this is not our war, it is Robert's war. Hearing Aemir say that, Ned turned a little sour and said. You shouldn't talk like that about your king, you might be a knight, but you are not a titled noble yet. Even then, you can't talk like that. My lord, of course, I will not talk like that in front of someone else, but I trust you. You know that whatever I do, I am doing it for the North. As for our good king, my lord, please be honest. Did he ever do one thing that would warrant my or northern people's respect other than the fact he is the king? That is why I will show him respect when I am outside, but to people I trust, I am going to state my mind. I have never seen a commoner like you, you do not have the engraved obedience they have, you act like everyone is your equal. Yes, I am trying to change and adapt the life here, and how I act caused many problems. I even made an enemy out of Lord Glover, but I am getting the hang of it. Aemir sighed and continued speaking. Since I am not going to help as the Druid, what are you going to do about Volmarks? If I don't give full pardon, they won't surrender, even if they do, we can't turn our backs on them. If I demobilize their army after they surrender, the soldiers will go to other nobles this time and fight alongside them against us. I have to think more about this. Aemir thought for a while and said. My lord, even if the king executes the Greyjoys, he will not take all the Iron Island nobles' heads. He wouldn't touch people like Volmarks. So, promise that you will protect him, his family, and his land, but ask him and his sons to be your guest until the war ends. And you can ask them to release the thralls they keep, in the north, we will need a workforce. We don't even have enough food to feed our own people, and you want me to take more in? My lord, if we want to raise the northern economy, we need a workforce. As for the food shortage, I have some plans for that, and I believe I can get us ready for the next winter. I am sensing this summer is going to be a long one. Chapter 138. 290 AC. POV third person. What do you mean you are sensing the summer is going to be long? I can't tell how long it will be, but I am sure it will be several years. The fire element in the air is really strong, and every passing day, even if it is by an iota, it is getting stronger. He lit a fire in his hand and said, every time I get stronger, my connection to the elements also strengthens. Now I can predict the weather accurately for a day, and as for the seasons, I can tell from the fire element in the air. For winter to come, the fire element needs to get weaker. When the fire element starts getting weaker, that will mark the changing of seasons. Even I don't fully understand how I can tell the fire element will keep getting stronger. It is just a feeling inside me, but it feels like it will last several years. Aemir clenched his fist, and the fire inside his fist was extinguished. Lord Stark said, I don't think they will accept releasing their thralls, and they would be basically leaving themselves to my mercy. If it was someone else, they wouldn't accept it, but if the one taking an oath is Ned Stark, they will believe it. Everyone knows you would rather die than break an oath. Aemir mumbled in a whispering voice. You are basically a Boy Scout. But Lord Stark managed to hear what he said. What is a Boy Scout? Sometimes you say really weird things. POV MC. After changing into the Druid persona, I come back to the camp to heal the wounded. Every time I see this, it still affects me. Seeing a grown man cry for his mother while trying to hold his guts inside with his hands is a harrowing sight. I try to heal them, but when such a big open wound is inflicted, even if I heal them and boost their body's immune system, most of the time, it is not enough to fight off infection. I try to use herbal medicine. Sometimes it helps, but it is usually too weak. I need to find a way to make better medicine, but that is for more peaceful times. After saving as many as possible, I was getting ready to leave, but a soldier kneeled before me and said, Ah, blessed one. Please help us in this war. With your help, we will lose fewer men to this war. I am sorry, but I cannot actively fight in this war. I am doing as much as possible. Why are you not helping us? I raised the staff in my hand and slammed it to the ground, and a small shake happened around us. Soldier! Do not forget who you are talking to. After I said that, he lost all color on his face, and he kneeled to the ground right away and then started to ask for forgiveness. With a loud voice, I said, I cannot actively fight in a fight that is fought for the sake of the Seven. The king is protector of the faith, and that faith is not our faith. If I fight as you do, it will serve the Seven, not the old gods. The only reason I am here. I paused for a dramatic effect and started pointing to the soldiers. Because you all are here. I will continue to mend your wounds and open the gates, but if Ironborn does not challenge the old gods, I cannot fight against them. I was talking bullshit, but what can I do? I need Aemir Drezel to be famous in this battle, the Druid is famous enough. After we took all the Valmark male descendants as guests, we continued on our way. Of course, we treated them formally and respectfully but without letting them out of their tent. After Valmark, I told Lord Stark the Harlas were taking out several hundred soldiers to the outside of their castle, and it looked like an ambush force. Lord Stark decided to create a buffer force and left them behind in case Harlas and other houses decided to hit us from behind. Close to 2,000 of our men were used for this buffer force. The rest of the army started marching for House Kenning. After destroying the castle gate as the Druid, I quickly returned as Aemir. As I was about to charge through the breached gates on top of Sith, I saw a white flag being waved on top of the walls. It was somewhat normal for House Kenning not to want to fight for the Harlas anymore, considering they used to be Harlas foes. They had already lost more than half of their men, and when the attack on the north failed, they also lost their Lord Kenning. He was in one of the ships Poe sank. We had conquered 2 of the 5 castles on this island without even losing 100 soldiers, and thanks to my scouting, our buffer force had ambushed the 900-men ambush force of Harlas and routed them. Lord Stark was really happy about our wins, and our losses were minimal. After that, House Meyer was a quick win, too, but not because they were weak but because they were stupid. The idiot zealots had marched out of their castle and met us in an open battle, and thanks to Sith, I had mowed them like a lawn. My halberd had been soaked with so much blood its color changed a bit in this battle. I had to spend a few hours cleaning all that blood and flesh that stuck onto it. They took 500 of our men with them. If, after every battle, I didn't come and heal our men, we would have lost at least 4 times more men. Especially in the battles against Myre, they wouldn't rout. They almost fought to the last man. After the field battle, when we were taking the castle, they still had around 500 men. One of the crazy Myre jumped from the castle wall to the top of Sith with his axe and managed to break 3 of Sith's ribs. Of course, the force of the crash had turned his body into a bloody mess, and he died after a few minutes, but he managed to take Sith out of the battle. I couldn't heal her immediately, so I had to retreat for an hour and act like I was treating her. Chapter 139. 290 AC. POVMC. After suppressing House Myre, we turned our sight to the 10-tower seat of Harla's. After suppressing 3 out of 5 houses on the island, we didn't need to fight the stone trees. Now all we have to do is beat Harla's, which will mark this island's end, and we can move on to Pike. Lord Stark again used 2,000 men to create a wall against a possible stone tree incursion. Harla still had 4,000 men inside their castle against our 17,000, but more than half of their men were made out of levies like their thralls. The village next to 10 Tower was abandoned, they must have retreated into the castle. 10 Towers was a big castle deserving of a house that could stand up to Greyjoys. 10 Towers, like Casterly Rock, was a castle built on the edge of high cliffs, of course not as high and large as Casterly Rock, but it was still a magnificent castle. The only thing I didn't like was the castle looked as if someone else had built each tower. The design of each tower was different from the other. Some were short and fat, while others were high and thin. One of them had a steep conical roof like the tip of a lance. Even the color of the towers was different. This castle was the newest one in the Iron Islands. Theomore Harla raised 10 Towers a few hundred years ago after 3 of his sons died, and he blamed the dampness of Harla Hall, the ancient seat of Harla's. Between the mismatched towers were many walks and bridges. According to what I read about this place, the fattest tower should be the Tower of Roderick Harla, the Reader. Unlike many of his kind, he was educated and had a vast library in his tower. Lord Harla had lost both of his sons in the Fair Island battle and declared his cousin Harris Harla the Knight, as his heir and gifted him with Nightfall, the ancestral Valyrian blade of House Harla. There were very few knights among Drowned God's followers because they were generally dishonorable and indecent raiders, but House Harla was trying to distance themselves from the old ways of the Iron Islands, which is why they tried to raise their sons as knights. While Harris wasn't as good a fighter as Victarion, he was certainly skilled, but I cannot charge in there while they have a Valyrian steel sword. I was not going to lose another of my familiars to those cursed swords. I have to find a way to pull Harris out of the castle before the battle starts. After thinking for a while, I remembered some of the medieval movies I watched when I was on Earth. This might work, but even if it did not, I didn't have anything to lose by trying. I came into Lord Stark's tent, and like always, he was buried inside a lot of maps trying to come up with better plans even when everything was decided. He had already told everyone what to do. "My lord, I have something to tell you." He lifted his head and looked at me with tired eyes. "My lord, please don't order an attack when I destroy the gate." "Why is that?" "I need to pull Harris Harla to a duel." He looked at me with a confused expression on his face that said, "I don't understand what you mean." "I have to neutralize their Valyrian sword." I put my hand on my sword and said, "Can I?" "Asked permission to pull my sword." "I already know you can kill me without it, why would I mind when you pull your sword?" "I already know you would never use your sword to kill me. You would most likely use your snake or make me fall from high places as you did to the drums." "My lord, I don't know what you are talking about." "Ah, please, I don't believe even for a second that they died of natural causes. Even if what you say is right, they were slavers and raiders. They got what they deserved. I would like to give it to them face to face, but Honorable Lord Royce forced my hand. Anyway, I pulled my sword and cast Corsumbi, Oak's Healed, on my arm. A bark-like armor encased my arm, then I brought the blade close to my body. When the sword touched the bark armor, the magical armor started to turn into dust. Valyrian swords are magical, everyone knows that, a sword that can always stay sharp and almost weightless, but what people don't know is it can break any spell below level 4 and make the holder immune to level 3 or below spells. I don't want a weapon like that in the hands of our enemies. Why are you telling me this? I trust you, and I have already mastered many level 4 spells. Are you sure you can beat him? I am sure I can beat him in a duel and kill him, which will boost our men's morale while demoralizing the enemy. Okay, if you can kill one of their prominent fighters, it will affect the battle. I have been in many battles since Bear Island, and countless people have died at my hands. Some were killed by the Druid, and some by Seagard, but always the magic was a part of it. I either burned them under raging flames or used more subtle methods when I was Seagard, like moving the soil under their foot or creating small dips in the places they would be stepping, and using the subtle method is harder than using raging flames. I need more control over my magic, and thanks to my X5 skill, I got so much better. It doesn't feel like I will level up, but I feel so much more in control. That may be why my mana reserve got bigger, and I got a few new spells after the battle against the Myers. Now I had 370 mana. One of the reasons why I was so sure of myself that I could beat him was because of my new spells. Rovagon Grze, Bark Armor, was a more powerful version of Oak's Healed. I tested it on some animals, and Red Rain could not dispel the armor, but it could penetrate it. When buffed, Harla hit it twice, and he managed to cut through it on his second hit. So, it was good for one hit against someone with 13 STR. I was starting to harness the power of the stars. Claustabula, star map, was basically a biological GPS. As long as I am able to see the stars or the sky, it doesn't matter if it is cloudy or not. I could tell which way was other places or how much distance was between us, but it only worked for places my familiars or I was before. Close Perses, Starfire, was an attack spell. I condensed a celestial light, and a beam of white light burned my target to ash. Gelmio Egros, Wind Blade, and this spell was my most powerful single target attack. Abrar Flamen, Life Blast, was a 30 meter radius AoE buff spell that created a wave of divine light energy to burst from me. This light blesses anyone I saw as a friend, it boosts their morale and stamina and then provides a minor heal to them. Kelio Rugiet, Lion's Roar, was a spell I always wanted. I wasted so much mana and died so many times to create this one. I don't remember how many times I exploded my throat to create this spell while I was training inside the space. It boosts my voice more than a megaphone would and imbues it with mana. It affects a 30 meter radius or 60 meter cone. It either boosts morale and creates a minor fear debuff on enemies. Chapter 140. 290 AC. POVMC. After I destroyed the gate as the Druid, I flew toward the south. When I got out of people's sight, I circled around and charged from north on top of Sith. This all happened in about 10 minutes. About 60 meters away, I dismounted from Sith and approached the gate. I didn't want to get any closer to the gate with Sith because there were many scorpions on the walls. I shouted with all my might. Sir Ermer Drazzle challenge Harla to a duel. There was no sound from Harla, so I started to speak harshly again. I have never seen someone that calls themselves knight stay so silent in front of a challenge. I turned to the northern army and said, while pointing toward the castle. Are we sure there is even one knight inside? I don't think there is. Upon my words, the army started to laugh, and then a voice came from the side of Harla's. I do not duel with nobodies and children. Yes, that was a good one. The tawny heir was saying the same things before dying under my sword. If you are afraid, just tell us, and we can start the battle. Don't shout from your castle without showing your face like a little cunt. Thunderous laughs started to rise from the northern army. Let me give you one more reason. I raised Red Rain to the air and said. I put the ownership of Red Rain as a reward for the winner. After a few minutes, he said. That does not belong to you, thief. How can you put something that doesn't belong to you as a reward? Remind me, how did House Drum become the owner of this sword? They won it in a respectable tourney, right? Or did they ambush the House Rain's heir and steal it? I raised Red Rain and continued. You can't steal from a thief, it is called liberating, and he is killed on the battlefield, not in an ambush. We have shown Drums more respect than they showed to the Rains. You can stand before me and find out if you don't believe me. Even if the sword was yours, what would I gain from killing a child? You will earn renown. I am called the Sword of the Old Gods in the North, and matter of fact, you are the true nobody here. Nobody would even remember your name if you weren't the owner of Nightfall. At the very least, I wouldn't care about your existence. After not getting any comeback, I continued. Look, nobody here is stupid. We all know you are trying to buy more time while trying to create more barricades around the gate. We know it, but we don't attack it. Do you know why? Because we northern men can crash a few wet rats such as yourself whenever we want. I am giving you a chance to be renowned not only on your little island but in all of Westeros. If you beat me and take Red Rain, you can choose to return it to House Drum or gift it to whomever you want. I am not going to be taunted by those words. I turned to the northern army and shouted. Men, do you see those cunts? They are so afraid of me that they keep wiggling. I knew your Lord Roderick was a bookworm, but I didn't know you were a worm too. I bet northern women would have bigger balls than you, wet rats. Another thunderous laughter raised from the army. Like your lord, do you use your balls as bookmarkers? Is that the reason you are still talking from the top of the walls? From now on, I name you the Jester Knight. I am going to be personally responsible for spreading this to every corner of the North, Westerlands, and Riverlands. Everyone around the world will know how the sword swallower and eunuch knight Harla couldn't even stand in front of a 16-NAME-day-old northern knight. After a few more minutes of silence from the side of Harla's, a knight slowly walked out of the destroyed gates. As soon as he had walked from the gates, I had already cast all my buff spells and my new armor spell. This spell didn't create a thick bark like the other one. It only created a protective aura around my skin, and this caused my skin to look a bit darker. This spell protected my body without any weak points, which meant even if I got hit in the eye with an arrow, at worst, it will feel like I got weakly punched in the eye. To be on the safe side, I cast Glow Magri, Spore Field. Small mushrooms were starting to grow in the grass, but I cast the spell a little further to our right, not where I am now. If I felt like I was going to lose the fight, I would pull him over there, and the spore field will create a hallucinogen effect for 2 minutes. Even with the protection of Nightfall, a level 4 spell will affect him long enough for me to kill him. He had full body plate armor, a shield and a banner were in his hands. The banner had his personal sigil on it and was quartered, a silver scythe on black, a peacock on cream. Like the banner, his shield had the same sigil painted on it. As I remember, the peacock was the sigil of House Serret. I am guessing his mother must be from Westerlands. He approached until I was about 10 meters away and stuck his banner into the ground. He was a tall man, around 1.95 m, and I was 10 centimeters shorter than him. After freeing his hand, he removed his helmet, and I did the same. He had a long and austere face and dark brown hair. On his belt, Nightfall was hanging. The sword was exquisite, had a long but thin blade, and was at least 5 centimeters longer than Red Rain. It had long cross guards, and in the middle, there were intricate golden embellishments. It had a long two-handed handle, and its pommel was made of moonstone. Moonstones were opalescent gemstones that resembled the full moon on a cloudless midnight. The Red Rain was a oni and a half-hand sword, but Nightfall was a proper two-handed sword, but this guy was going to use it with a shield. He must be really sure of his power. Because of the sword, I was not able to see his stats until he made his move, but I was guessing he had around 1213 STR if he was going to use that sword with one hand. Boy, I am going to make you eat those words. You are going to beg for mercy. We will see about that. Oh, and thank you. He looked at me with confused eyes. Thank you for bringing the Nightfall to me.
Thanks for listening.